I would like to thank the IPLSA for inviting me to present at the annual conference in a virtual format. Since there are a fairly limited number of presenters for the required Kentucky Ethics Standards Code of Conduct coursework, you kind of get stuck with whoever has availability when the course is needed. This year it appears that you will be stuck with me. I had the opportunity to attend the IPLSA conference way back in about 2013. It was a really well put together conference, and I met several good people at that conference, so I'm very happy to have the opportunity to return some of that hospitality by presenting this course for you at this virtual conference. Please note that the course is originally prepared and submitted for the board approval, that's the Kentucky Board of Licensure, through the Kentucky Association of Professional Surveyors. So the CAPS logo and suggestion to join CAPS may occur within the pre-prepared program. Since this is being hosted by IPLSA as a benefit for those with a license in both Illinois and Kentucky, the key point still holds. Be a member of your state's professional society if you want to be a part of the direction the profession will be taking in the future. If you are not currently an IPLSA member, you should investigate joining and becoming active in choosing that direction. Hello, and welcome to the Kentucky Association of Professional Surveyors presentation on Ethics, Code of Conduct, and Standards of Practice. This course has been developed to meet the requirements of 201 KAR 18192, Section 3, Item 2, and has received pre-approval from the CPD Committee of the Kentucky Board of Licensure for Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. This course is offered to both members and non-members of CAPS. If you are not currently a member of CAPS, I would encourage you to join. Membership in CAPS also provides membership in the National Society of Professional Surveyors. Aside from participating in the professional societies driving the future direction of surveying, there are additional benefits to membership. Please check the website of CAPS at www.kaps1.com and the website for NSPS at www.nsps.us.com for more information on the benefits of association. As we proceed through this program, realize that I am making no claim to be more knowledgeable in the subject matter nor more ethically inclined than anyone who is taking the course. I just happen to be willing to put together and present the program. As we work through each section, I will emphasize potential topics for deeper thought beyond taking the course. Sometimes these ideas will be presented with a contrary view. If you are doing things in a different manner, I am not stating you are in the wrong. The 8-hour in-person version of this program involves a good deal of audience discussion. One thing that I have noticed in those discussions is that there are different viewpoints on the many items that we will be looking at. About the presenter. Just to briefly introduce you to the person behind the microphone for this online offering, I am Jonathan Payne, a professional land surveyor licensed in Kentucky since 2000. I began my surveying career while attending Murray State University when I took my first surveying course. I was hooked. I enjoyed the surveying courses so much that I carried on with a master's degree, which allowed me to take additional surveying coursework. Once college was completed, I worked at a couple of surveying and engineering firms in western Kentucky to gain my required experience. Shortly after getting licensed, I opened my own sole proprietorship business providing surveying services in Trigg County. From 2013 to 2017, I took a brief break from private practice and taught the surveying coursework for the Civil Engineering Technology program at Murray State. Then, in 2017, I went back into private practice. In developing this course for presentation, I thought it would be appropriate to first look at a published definition of ethics in order to see if my idea of what ethics meant was consistent with the definition. From the online Merriam-Webster dictionary, the first definition is the discipline dealing with what is good and bad, and with moral duty and obligation. This seems straightforward as long as we all agree on what is considered good and what is bad. Unfortunately, that is not always the case. Let's look at additional definitions and see if they make the picture clearer. Other definitions from the Merriam-Websters.com website for ethics is a set of moral principles, a theory or system of moral values, the principles of conduct governing an individual or a group, such as professional ethics, a guiding philosophy, a consciousness of moral importance, and a set of moral issues or aspects, as in rightness. From these definitions, we see a common occurrence of the word moral, so that should clear things up for us. Basically, ethics are morally acceptable actions and ideas. However, if we look for the definition of moral, we see statements such as of or relating to principles of right and wrong in behavior. So this again becomes a problem of who defines what is good and what is right. There are entire courses in local colleges around the country dedicated to discussing these matters. There are almost as many ideas of what is good as there are people in the world. Ethics is from the Greek word ethos, meaning character, ethos being the root of ethikos, meaning moral or showing moral character, and these words led to the Latin ethica, or moral philosophy. Digging into the etymology of the word ethics, we see the roots in Greek and Latin, which derive from concepts of moral behavior. So where do most people develop their ideas of moral behavior, and whose idea of moral behavior should we be using to determine professional ethics? While the concept has vagueness when we think about the differences between two individuals' ideas, there are some somewhat universal ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Despite the vastness of the earth, ideas of what is right and wrong developed through various religious and philosophical schools of thought and came to influence modern-day ideas of moral and therefore ethical behavior. Let's look at some of the sources where people might have developed their individual ideas of what is right and what is wrong. Religion. And as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. Luke 6:31, King James Version. Hurt not others in ways that you yourself would find hurtful. Udana Varga 5:18. What is hateful to you, do not to your fellow man. This is the law. All the rest is commentary. Talmud, Shabbat 31a. Often people come to see right and wrong based upon either their direct involvement in a religious organization or from parents or grandparents who were members of these organizations and passed ideas of right and wrong down to their children and grandchildren. The preceding examples were from Christianity, Buddhism, and Judaism. This is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but simply to show the common stream of one idea of right behavior. which developed through different religious traditions. As many of us know, this one is often called the Golden Rule. And while it sounds great, it is often difficult to follow all of the time. I know that I do not want others to be angry at me, but I am guilty of being angry at others sometimes. Personally, this idea of acting ethically at all times seems to take conscious effort to do. Philosophy. Act as if the maxim of thy action were to become by thy will a universal law of nature. Foundations of Metaphysics of Morals, Immanuel Kant. Do not do to others that which would anger you if others did it to you. Socrates. The same concept of the Golden Rule can be found in schools of philosophy. It is possible that these individuals may have had the same earlier influence as the religious text, with the idea of treating others as you would like to be treated being so widely spread, it could be thought of as a universal truth. However, not everyone follows this idea, so barring familiarity with a religious or philosophical idea of ethical behavior, where could we potentially see guiding principles for professional ethics? The earlier definition of ethics being the principles of conduct governing an individual or a group, as in professional ethics, leads us to the idea that concept of ethics can be found in terms of our professional societies, boards, and the rules and regulations that we must follow. This can be combined with and supplement our individual ideas of ethics. We have looked at the broad idea of ethical behavior. Let's now narrow into professional ethics for surveyors and engineers. Many professions have formal oaths and a code of conduct. The words in the oath and the code of conduct can often serve as a point of reference for determining what the profession considers ethical behavior. Let's look at some of the potential sources we, as professional land surveyors and professional engineers, have written down to see what the guiding philosophy of the profession is. The NSPS, or NSPE, Surveyors or Engineers Creed. As a professional engineer or surveyor, I dedicate my professional knowledge and skills to the advancement and betterment of human welfare. I pledge to give the utmost of performance, to participate in none but honest enterprise, to live and work according to the laws of humankind and the highest standards of professional conduct, to place service before profit, honor and standing of the profession before personal advantage, and the public welfare above all other considerations. In humility and with need for divine guidance, I make this pledge. At a national level, both the NSPS and NSPE have developed a creed to help exemplify the professional view of what the professional surveyor and professional engineer should strive for. Prior to preparing this seminar, it had been a long time since I read the Surveyor's Creed. Rereading it while developing this program, I paid a particular attention to the words. The manner in which the ideas are expressed is done so well that the tone makes it sound very lofty. However, the concepts are actually quite basic. If we break it down into some plain language, this creed simply says, as a professional, I will work to improve the world in some manner. I'll try my best. I'll deal honestly with others. I'll follow the laws established and conduct myself as the profession has deemed correct. This can be problematic to some extent if we overthink what is stating, especially the last section, which places public welfare above all other considerations. My interpretation of this section is that we must prioritize the service we are providing to make sure that it is of consistently high quality. Of course, we have to make a profit or we cannot stay in business. However, we cannot shirk our professional responsibilities in order to increase profit margins. If we provide shoddy service in order to increase profit margins, it reflects upon not just ourselves, but the profession as a whole. Throughout our work, we must always think of the public welfare and how our work can impact the public not only now, but in the future as well. We have looked at the Surveyor's Engineer's Creed. Now let's look at Kentucky's Code of Professional Practice and Conduct. This can be found in Section 142 of Chapter 18 in the Kentucky Administrative Regulations. So we will jump over portions of Chapter 18 at this point in order to continue the idea of professional ethics. However, here is an outline of the contents of Chapter 18 so that you can see where, within the chapter, we will be picking up with professional practice. Note that the preceding sections to 142 mainly deal with the process of becoming licensed, something that we should all be familiar with already. As is common with laws, the first portion of this section defines several terms. Within the Code of Practice and Conduct, these 5 terms are defined: conflict of interest, employee, licensee, and work product are all fairly well known. So we will look specifically at the definition of direct supervisory control. Direct supervisory control in the practice of engineering means that an engineer licensee directly supervises and takes responsibility for consultation, investigation, evaluation, planning, design, and certification of an engineering project, and includes only that work performed by an employee as defined in subsection 4. Direct supervisory control in the practice of land surveying means that a surveyor licensee who certifies a work product directly supervises and takes responsibility for the survey and includes only that work performed by an employee as defined in subsection 4. While the phrase directly supervises is very important, I think a key takeaway from this definition is and takes responsibility for. In my opinion, if you are taking responsibility for your employee's work, you had better be very sure that it is correct, which inherently means you should be directly supervising what they are doing. If they make a mistake and that gets out of the office, it is because you did not provide enough supervision. In Section 2 of KAR 18-142, one of the ideas expressed in the Surveyor's or Engineer's Creed resurfaces: the idea of conducting our professional practice in order to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. It is noted that our continued professional practice is a privilege, not a right, meaning that there is the possibility of losing one's license and therefore the option to practice surveying or engineering. By following the established laws, the privilege of professional practice can continue. This section also establishes a requirement to report potentially dangerous situations in such a manner as to try and make sure that they are resolved. This may require going beyond your employer or client to get resolution. One often cited instance of the need for reporting concerns about safety is the 1986 Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. While various engineers from different groups reported concerns that the launch should not take place based on both historic concerns over an O-ring as well as unknown performance due to launching outside of tested temperatures, ultimately the ill-fated launch took place. It may seem a bit over the top to state, but lives may truly depend on taking a lead and reporting unsafe conditions until they are addressed. Section 3 of KAR 18142 addresses truthfulness in communications and work product. The concept of honest was already introduced in the surveyor's or engineer's creed. A key phrase from this section is material fact. Black's Law Dictionary defines a material fact in terms of particular functions such as contracts, insurance, pleadings, and the practice of law and judgment. A commonality among the definitions is that a material fact is a fact which, when disclosed, has potential to alter a decision. One instance that has been used to generate discussion during the in-person course has been to ask if everyone includes looking at the FEMA-issued firm maps for the subject property and making a disclosure of what was found. This is required in many areas as part of the subdivision process, but is there a need to do so when preparing a plat for a retracement survey? As Section 3 continues, the Code of Conduct indicates we are not supposed to maliciously injure another professional's reputation, practice, or employment. If another licensee has practiced in such a manner that you cannot resist the urge to badmouth that person to the general public in hopes of encouraging them not to use that licensee's services, then the problem has probably gone beyond a matter of simple disagreement with another professional on a professional practice decision, which means you probably should have already acted as we will discuss in Section 10 of the Code of Professional Conduct. There are two main concerns I have with bad-mouthing other professionals to the public. One, it can appear petty and vindictive, reflecting poorly upon both yourself and the profession as a whole. Or two, if the other practitioner is in fact so bad that the public needs you to warn them away, they should not be practicing the profession, a decision that should be made after investigation by the Board of Licensure. Briefly addressing a contingency fee for serving as an expert witness, not only is it a violation of this section, it introduces the appearance of a conflict of interest because you get paid based on a particular outcome, and it makes no business sense to offer to not get paid for your time. The requirements to maintain records are set to 5 years for professional engineers and refer to 201 KAR 18150, Section 10, Item 2 and Item 3 for professional land surveyors. For professional land surveyors, that essentially requires a permanent record. The record requirements for an individual licensee are met if the business entity employing the individual maintains the records for the same period of time discussed in this section. In Section 4 of the Code of Conduct, the potential for conflict of interest is discussed. If the potential is there, notification of affected parties is necessary. Accepting payment from multiple parties for the same identical project is also addressed. Since this instance could introduce the potential for a conflict of interest, disclosure is required. The potential for kickbacks through specifying materials or requirements which would benefit a particular party are addressed, and unsurprisingly, this is not an allowed practice. Continuing in Section 4, we see some of the ideas from the surveyors and engineers' creed coming back, specifically honest enterprise. Misrepresentation of cost, quality, or extent of services to be provided, or the qualifications and experience of personnel on the project are not allowed. Such misrepresentation could potentially be harmful to the public welfare and could lead to potential conflict of interest as required work versus price charged compete for top priority. In the in-person session of this course, an ethical decision discussion is often brought up concerning the professional land surveyor or professional engineer's potential ethical duty to not just price for what exactly a client has requested, but provide guidance as to what is actually needed, specifically in cases where the professional is fully aware of the need for services beyond what the client is requesting in order to fully accomplish what will be needed. Section 5 of the Code of Conduct addresses solicitation for work and specifically points out that you should only solicit for work within your area of competency. Also addressed is the offering of kickbacks or bribes in order to gain work. So do not offer or accept valuable consideration in order to secure work. In addition, advertising is noted as being fine as long as it isn't false or misleading. So advertising a lot survey for $399.99 that has extremely small print that cannot be read but explains all of the extras that will be tacked on to the final bill would probably not be appropriate. Section 6. Often we are judged by the company we keep. Association with those involved in illegal or dishonest activities can reflect poorly upon yourself and by extension your profession. Allowing the use of either your company name or your individual name by those involved in illegal activities is just an invitation to get dragged into potential legal problems. Each of these items that we address in the Code of Professional Conduct is in there because they have been addressed in the past because someone has taken these actions. So while I do not understand why one would want to aid someone else to practice the profession illegally instead of just taking on the work yourself, we have to clearly state in the Code of Conduct that licensees are not allowed to aid or abet the illegal practice of engineering or land surveying. It is also important to note that your crew members are often a more visual portion of your business as they are in the field, and as such their actions can be seen as a reflection of their employer. So it might be wise to also discuss expected levels of professionalism with your crew. Section 7 seems very similar to Section 5. However, Section 5 dealt with soliciting for work. In Section 7, we specifically address accepting work within your area of competency. Take on work only within areas you are competent to perform the work. Although work may be accepted which requires expertise outside of one's experience and education, with the understanding that those services will be both performed and certified by others who do have the expertise to perform those services. These other individuals can be your associates or outside consultants, or may even be employees with specific knowledge on the service area. It is important to be aware that if a concern about competency comes about, the licensee may be required to prove competency by way of examination. Section 8 deals with certification of work products and requires that the licensee certifying work have education or experience supporting competency in the prepared work product and have either prepared the work him or herself or been in direct supervisory control of the work product. In some instances, an engineer may need to review, certify, or modify the work product of another licensee. There are many subsections addressing how to properly approach this occasion, should it be necessary. Some key items are to maintain records, not remove the identifying information of the other licensee, confirm the license status of the other licensee at the time the work was created, clearly identify portions reviewed or modified. It is noted in Section 8 that incorporating standard drawings is accepted practice. Continuing with Section 8, we note that delegation of tasks is allowed. However, review of the work is required in order to meet the requirement of supervisory control. While it is not required that a professional land surveyor make a site visit for every project, failure to do so may be construed as failure to exercise direct supervisory control. The choice of making or not making a site visit is subjective and should be based on the nature of the project, the size and complexity of the project, and the capabilities of your technicians. Finally, in Section 8, we see that an employee may investigate the circumstances of a potential project, but only the licensee can establish the scope of work to be performed. In some of the in-person sessions of this course, resulting good discussion about where the line is to be drawn between the two functions of investigating the circumstances versus establishing the scope has occurred. Tied in with this discussion is the idea of how to provide up-and-coming professionals with opportunity to expand their professional growth prior to licensure. Section 9 seems very clear, so I'll simply read the statement contained within it. The professional engineer or professional land surveyor shall avoid conduct likely to discredit or reflect unfavorably upon the dignity or honor of his or her profession. Section 10 of the Code of Professional Conduct sets forth a requirement of reporting violations. The proper means of reporting an issue is to send in a complaint in writing. If you have pulled aside a current member of the Board of Licensure and told them about an issue in your area, you have not made a formal complaint. Additionally, you may have biased that board member, leading to the potential need to recuse themselves in future actions against the other licensee. Making a complaint against another licensee is a difficult decision to make. We, as surveyors and engineers, are generally decent people who would not want to harm the livelihood of another. A couple of key discussion points that come up during the live sessions of this course are as follows. 1. The initial application of professional courtesy in order to try to correct an issue is appropriate. Although the language in Section 10 leaves no leeway for this, if you find that a fellow licensee has just missed keeping up with a change in regulation, such as referring to a survey as urban or rural versus using the older class system, a call to point out this issue is appropriate. It is a pattern of neglecting the KRS and KAR after a professional courtesy call that should be reported. With limited resources, if small matters such as a missing north arrow can be handled between professionals, the board resources can be used to address serious offenses. 2. If you reach a point where a formal complaint must be made, realize that you are not making the decision that the other licensee is not competent to practice. You are providing the Board of Licensure with information for them to investigate and act upon as determined to be appropriate by the results of that investigation. Your complaint could lead to the determination that there is not an issue through many intermediate stages up to the potential revocation of license. The Board of Licensure is not out to get people. They are here to protect the public and the integrity of the profession. In Section 11, contact with board members about an ongoing disciplinary action or investigation being conducted by the Board of Licensure staff is addressed. Since the board members must vote and make a final decision on such matters, do not contact them about a case in order that they remain unbiased and view only the facts developed from the investigation. If you have information on the case, that information should be conveyed directly to the board staff. Section 12 of the Code of Professional Conduct pertains to seeking clarification from the board if a licensee has a concern about the ethical propriety of an action. A licensee may seek input from the board by way of either a written or emailed request with a subject line of, quote, request for advisory opinion pursuant to 201 KAR 18-142, end quote, and containing appropriate contact information. Using information provided by the licensee, the executive director will provide a written response. a licensee will not face disciplinary action for following said advisory opinion, provided that the original request provided a full accounting of the matter. While this section specifically addresses ethical concerns, I would also note that the Board of Licensure has been very helpful to those seeking clarification on technical matters of the standards of practice as well. As we have seen, the Code of Professional Conduct provides some guidance on expectations of what ethical behavior consists of for professional engineers and professional land surveyors. Specific situations were addressed, such as conflicts of interest. In addition, Kentucky Revised Statutes also provide expectations for specific behavior or requirements from professional engineers and professional land surveyors. As with the section of KAR that we looked at earlier, KRS 322 starts by defining several key terms that will be found within the legislation. These terms are familiar to those of us who are licensed. However, key points that should be retained from these definitions are: 1. Surveys for the purpose of engineering design that do not relate to the location or determination of land boundaries are permitted under the umbrella definition of engineering. 2. The negotiation or solicitation of engineering services for projects within the Commonwealth of Kentucky is considered the practice of engineering. As we continue to the definitions in the area of land surveying, we see that land surveying includes many activities that are often performed by others, such as general mapping and construction layout of projects referenced to property boundaries. This discussion is often brought up in the in-person course. Layout, especially in reference to a property boundary, is defined to be a function of professional land surveying. However, is the use of the boundary corner as a reference or control network for layout purposes still under the definition of land surveying? This has been discussed at the in-person course several times with no definitive resolution. The negotiation or solicitation of surveying projects in the Commonwealth of Kentucky is considered the practice of land surveying, and the preparation of descriptions for legal instruments affecting real property or property rights is within the definition of land surveying, with the exception that a reference description does not fall within this definition. Exceptions to the definition of land surveying are measurements of agricultural land for programs sponsored by federal and state agencies, land surveying incident to an engineering project which does not relate to location or determination of boundaries, and the design of grades do not fall within the definition of land surveying. As the presenter of the program, I get to interject some of my own personal bias and viewpoints, so I would like to quickly note that the teaching of engineering design courses is defined as the practice of engineering, yet the teaching of land surveying courses is not defined as land surveying. I personally take issue with someone teaching a subject to potential future licensees when they themselves have not demonstrated competency through the same three-legged step stool of education, experience, and examination that is required to become licensed. Business entity is an important definition in that if your professional practice is in the form of a business entity, you must also comply with firm permitting through the Board of Licensure. Note that an offer to practice extends beyond the professional developing a proposal for a project. It also includes, quote, any claim, express or implied, by any person representing himself or herself to be a professional engineer or professional land surveyor, end quote. Although it has been in place for a while, it should be noted that many of the examinations have been moved to being computer-based testing and are more readily available throughout the year than the 2 times per year that used to be offered. Unless licensed as a professional engineer or professional land surveyor, people are not supposed to engage in or offer to engage in the practice of engineering or land surveying. They're also not supposed to use titles or advertise in such a way as to imply that they are a professional engineer or professional land surveyor. Exceptions to the prohibition of practicing without a license include the work of employees of a licensee, which is covered by direct supervision and verification by the licensee. So employees are able to engage in the practice of engineering and land surveying so long as they are directly supervised by the licensee. Also accepted is the practice of engineering or land surveying by United States government employees engaged on projects for the government. The practice of land surveying or engineering by an individual on their own property that he or she leases or owns is an exception to the unlicensed practice requirement unless such practice involves the public health, safety, or welfare, or the land surveying relates to the location or determination for any existing or proposed land boundaries. Also accepted is the practice of engineering or land surveying by someone engaged solely by a privately owned public utility or business entity engaged in interstate commerce per the Interstate Commerce Act. An additional exception is that a licensed architect performs engineering incident to the practice of architecture. Also accepted is the practice of engineering related solely to the design or fabrication of manufactured products. In the licensing requirements, both engineering and land surveying require the 3-legged step stool that supports our professions of education, experience, and examination. To be eligible to become licensed as a professional engineer is required to have a 4-year degree from an EAC ABET accredited program, plus 4 years of progressive experience in engineering or teaching, passing the principles and practice of engineering examination. With the board approval, a doctoral degree can drop the experience requirement down to 3 years. To become licensed as a professional land surveyor, there are 3 options. The first option is a 4-year land surveying degree recognized by the board, combined with 3 years of progressive experience and passing the principles and practice of land surveying examination. An alternate route is a 4-year degree with 24 credit hours from a core curriculum outlined in KAR, combined with 4 years of progressive experience and passing the principles and practice of land surveying examination. The third option is obtaining a 4-year EAC ABET accredited degree in civil, mining, or agricultural engineering, combined with 12 credit hours of the core curriculum as outlined in KAR, 4 years of progressive experience, and the passing of the principles and practice of land surveying examination. An applicant for licensure must be of good character and able to communicate in English, and an applicant is ineligible for licensure if they have been convicted of a felony in the past 10 years involving violence, sexual misconduct, fraud, or deceit, if the individual has engaged in conduct likely to deceive or defraud, or adjudged by a court mentally disabled. A business entity is required to get a firm permit for their business entity in order to practice engineering or land surveying within the Commonwealth of Kentucky. At least one licensee, a principal officer or employee of the business entity, is supposed to be in responsible charge of work at the Kentucky office if one is maintained. The required firm paperwork is to provide the name and address of all principals and officers, the license number of principals, officers, and employees who are professional engineers in responsible charge of the business entity's practice of engineering in Kentucky, and a list of locations of all offices in the state which the business entity offers professional engineering services from. If any of these items change, the business entity is to advise the board in writing within 30 days of those changes. A licensee rendering only part-time or consulting services is not permitted to be the person in responsible charge of the office, unless that licensee is an officer or owner of the business entity. A sole proprietor practicing under the name on their license is excluded from the requirement of obtaining a business entity permit. Just as with your individual professional license, a business entity may have their permit revoked for disciplinary actions related to violations of the Code of Conduct. All business entity permits have an annual renewal date of January 1. As we know, your employees are an extension of and a reflection of your business. The business entity assumes responsibility for the professional actions of those working for the business. However, a professional licensee is also responsible on an individual basis for their professional actions and cannot simply pass through responsibility for their professional decisions to the business entity without facing the consequences of their actions. Disciplinary action against a business entity is administered in the same manner as against an individual licensee. With the NCEES moving to computer-based testing, much of the information exchange is handled through use of an NCEES record when applying for licensure. This record allows NCEES to furnish state boards with the information supplied, such as experience and education. Upon completion of education, examination, and experience, use the online application found on the Board of Licensures website in order to apply for a license. At least 5 references containing 3 licensees will be required with your application. As has already been noted, computer-based testing has made most of the examinations more frequently available. Look through the NCEES website for your nearest location and available times for examination. The state-specific portion of the Principle and Practice of Land Surveying examination has been set aside at this time and is no longer required to become licensed as a professional land surveyor. Failing the exams 3 or more times will require a new application detailing the additional knowledge gained since the last failure of the examination.